Paterson Price for Tuesday, December 3rd, 2024, coming to you from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee, here at the historic Wall Center. And Sekeres Price, a presentation of Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION when opening that account. Matt Sekeres alongside Blake Price, four-time Juno Award winner. Mike Rogerson hitting switches, conducting things. Big show coming up as the Canucks end this 6-game road trip in Minnesota with their first real test, huge test of the season. More on that in a moment. But the rumor mill continues to swirl around Vancouver Canucks centerman JT Miller. And so, for our Surrey Mitsubishi poll question, are you bothered by the JT Miller trade talk? Yes or no? You can vote at the S&P X and YouTube channels.
It's becoming a bit of a distraction for the fans at the very least, because, you know, it's not just one basement podcast that's talking about things. Like Spittin' Chicklets is talking about it on the regular. Andy Strickland, who's got a prominent hockey podcast out of St. Louis, is talking about it. And, of course,
very connected in USA hockey circles, too. There.
And Arthur Staple, as we mentioned, from The Athletic, talking about it as well. So it's everywhere. And, you know, it's weird timing for me, Matt, given that he's on a personal leave. Like, it's just for a guy with a no-move clause on a personal leave. So it's not like you can just talk about this in a vacuum.
No, you can't. Although, you know, I do wonder, and, you know, there's more and more speculation out there, and it's just speculation, but, of course, in the absence of real hard information, whether or not this leave has graver consequences in terms of his tenure in Vancouver. Like, at some point, if you're Canucks Sports Entertainment and the hockey operations management team here, yeah, you absolutely want best for the person, JT Miller, but you also have to get about the business of trying to win a Stanley Cup. And so, look, the good news, Strickland saying that USA Hockey is going to take him here, or has, I guess the players have already been informed, for the USA Four Nations face-off team. Now, that tournament is in February, so ample time here to be ready for that. Of course, they can also replace him if need be closer to the tournament. So that's not a be-all, end-all proclamation that JT Miller is back and is going to be back by February. I think this discussion is really going to ramp up when the team gets back here after this tilt in Minnesota, because they're here, and they're here for an awfully long time. You had talked about it yesterday, that it is an extraordinarily busy hockey schedule after a ton of 2- and 3-day breaks in the first couple of months of the season. But starting Friday with this home game against Columbus, every second day the Vancouver Canucks are playing a hockey game through until December 16th at home.
It's a lot of hockey.
And really through December 23rd, all told. Most of those games are at home. Most of those games will be well attended, media-wise, from the Vancouver contingent. And I'm sure the questions will persist about JT. Now, look, I'm not bothered by the trade talk. It's a ruthless business. We all know that. We also know that general managers have to field inquiries, explore ways to improve their team. And yes, that sometimes includes trading fan favorites. And sometimes when you trade a fan favorite, it signals their rebuild. I can think back to the Alex Burrows trade to the Ottawa Senators. You remember that one, Blake? Which signaled that, yeah, finally the Canucks were ready to, give up on that team, that post-2011 team that, had really shown no signs that they still had a competitive window. And sometimes trading a fan favorite makes you better. Like when you traded Todd Bertuzzi for Roberto Luongo, and instantly got better.
But that was a rebuild, a retool at the very least. So,
retool, rebuild. The retool, you can get better.
Right, but that's not where the Canucks are at. Like, the Canucks are a contender right now. And you might still say, oh, but a blockbuster trade to tweak the core is still that's fine. But find me the example of a player with a no-move clause on a contending in-flight team. Like, this team is in flight. It's been only good vibes for 18 months around this team. Find me the player that's been asked to waive his no-move clause to leave that team to go to a place where they're floundering and their direction is uncertain. Find me that example. Doesn't happen.
No.
Like, the no-move clause guy in the Rangers is willing to waive, for sure.
Well,
but not the other way around.
Although Drager told us that Trouba isn't, it's not a no move. It's
just
a
not
modified
now.
no
Just
trade.
not now,
That there are some players that, don't want to upend their life in the middle of the season.
Yeah.
Bo didn't have any trade protection, did he, when they sent him to the Islanders?
I don't think so.
Anyways, different ways to interpret the question and cast your vote, and many of you have already done so on the feedback channels, both X and YouTube. Let's get to our top story, brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, Foolish Winery. First big test of the season tonight at Minnesota. And we say test because, yes, they have played the Edmonton Oilers. Yes, they have played some other good teams, including the reigning Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers, albeit that game without Barkov and Tkachuk, so a stripped-down version of the Florida Panthers. But you actually do have to get somewhat through the season before we can start talking about tests.
Who's the tough out, yeah.
And measuring up. And needless to say, this Minnesota Wild team, where Kirill Kaprizov leads the National Hockey League in scoring going into Tuesday games at 38 points and with 15 goals. This Minnesota Wild team has been one of the great surprises of the NHL season. Now, I like them as a playoff team this year, but a little closer to the wild card bar than leading the Western Conference with a 750 points percentage, having won 16 games, dropping only 4 in regulation and 4 more in overtime or shootouts. And the irony is this Minnesota Wild team, much like your Vancouver Canucks, have done most of its damage on the road. They're 10-1-3 on the road. They actually have fewer regulation losses on the road than the 10-2 Vancouver Canucks. They have been better at home, 6-3-1. That's a good home mark.
Not scintillating, though.
No,
right.
not, yeah. It's better than 3-5-3, which is where the Canucks are at. And look, the chatter has started up, and rightfully so. This is a very intelligent hockey market. Fans here not only know their team, they know the league. They can cast a broad view across the NHL and understand who's good, who isn't. And look, we did the math. The Canucks are 3-5-1 versus playoff teams this year, playoff teams from last season. So of the 16 that made the playoffs last year, the Canucks have played 9 games against them this year, 3-5-1.
And then we took a look at who's in playoff positions right now.
And the Canucks are 3-4-2.
So
they're
the same.
Slightly better,
Yeah.
and we use points percentage to determine those playoff teams when talking about the here and the now. So in either case, a losing record. In either case, a sub-500 record.
Mm-hmm.
You give them credit for beating the teams that they should, and we saw that over the course of the weekend in Buffalo and Detroit, right? Not great teams, and the Canucks took care of business. The other thing you have going on tonight is you have quite a showdown, a derby, in goal, where Kevin Lankinen is going to start again. Thatcher Demko needs more time, so it's going to be this homestand. It's not going to make the road trip. Versus Gustafsson in the Minnesota goal, who many have pegged, Philip Gustafsson, as the starter for Sweden at the Four Nations.
It's take the under. We're not quite there yet. Take the under here. I mean, you might get a little bit lulled into thinking that because they've got Kaprizov that, this is an explosive team. It's not that explosive offensively. When with these two keepers in net, I do get the feeling a little bit here, Matt, that the Canucks have shot their shot on this road trip in terms of their offense. Like the Canucks have actually scored a decent amount of goals here on this road trip. But this is the last game. It's a little bit difficult knowing that you've got a pretty decent amount of points on this road trip already, and it's subconscious. You're not actually thinking this. Oh, we've done enough. We're ready to go home. But your back doesn't feel like it's against the wall here tonight versus the Wild, having got 4 wins already. I'm not saying they can't win. I just wouldn't expect them to go out and win this game 5-2. I think if they win this game, it's likely a 2-1, 3-1 empty netter kind of scenario is my thinking. And
so like the Boston game where you hang on, you get outplayed.
Maybe
but
not quite that badly,
okay.
but yes, I think a little closer to that. I mean, again, this still is a banged up Canucks team with no Miller, no Roenick, and no Demko. So they're going to have to eke this one out, I think. And I think they can, but it's going to be a dicey one.
Gotcha. You know what would help? And Tocchet has been hammering this for most of the season. And it's really a flip of the script from last year when so often the Vancouver Canucks scored the first goal. And, a fair amount of the time scored the second goal, too. They were very good front runners last year, getting on teams early and putting them away. Well, not so much this year. They've scored the first goal just 9 of 23 times. But even worse, and Jeff has been talking about this, Blake, they average 8.6 shots in first periods. So it's not just slow starts in terms of giving up the first goal. It's not really mounting much of an offensive attack in the first period. So we'll see how they do here tonight. As Jeff notes, you've got Brock Boeser 2 points away from 400 in his career. He would be the 15th Vancouver Canuck to reach that milestone. And, of course, this is his spot, right? His home state of Minnesota, where he made his National Hockey League debut, scored in his first game. He has 3 assists in the 4 games since his return to the lineup after that concussion from Tanner Jeannot, the bad hit from Tanner Jeannot. And you have to feel, I think, a little bit, as I'm feeling about Dakota Joshua as well, that really due to get a goal here. Joshua's played 9 games since returning from testicular cancer. He's got 2 assists, no goals there yet. I think you're going to see Joshua at some point here break out, and I wouldn't be surprised if Boeser gets back into the goal-scoring column after his absence for a chunk of November.
Yeah, I think they're both probably due, and I think that Boeser in particular has looked good at times. The good news is, I think, for both of those guys in particular who, haven't been able to come up for a breath much since they got back into the lineup is, even though it's not an extra day off, doesn't it feel like it was? But that early game on Sunday,
to some degree, you're right.
While, this is the 6th game of a long road trip and all that, it sort of feels like they did get that extra day off. I hope their bodies feel like our brains do in terms of that. Like it feels like it's been an extra day off in between games. I wonder if their bodies feel the same way, that they get most of Sunday as recuperation after the game. Then they get their full day yesterday. They were on the practice sheet, and then no game day skate as well. Like, I think good choices made there by Rick Tocchet to omit the morning skate entirely, not even an optional. Just making sure guys rest, sleep in, all that, and be ready for the game, local time, evening game for the Wild. But I think it bodes well to get whatever they've got left in the tank. I think you're going to get every drop of it here tonight.
J-Pat was looking at how the Canucks have managed to win these games. And remember, Boeser was out. Boeser came back. Miller was out. Roenick was out. Demko hasn't been there. So the Canucks are 9-5 since November 1st. And, of course, Miller and Boeser for large parts, Demko for the entirety, and more recently Roenick. But as Jeff notes, more remarkable, Besser has just one goal, and Miller had 2 empty netters during that span when they were in the lineup. So it's not like Miller and Besser were shooting the lights out and fueling a 9-5 record since the start of November. I think this speaks to, and Tocchet has messaged this many a times in the postgame, how different guys have stepped up. And you got to absolutely love the fact that minus a couple of his teammates and actually fellow Americans, Connor Garland is playing at nearly a point per game. How DeBrusk, and yeah, we know he's streaky, has really stepped up and helped them win a game in Detroit. That Pius Shooter, as we're calling him now, has found a scoring touch, has 9 goals, second on the team. It wasn't that long ago we were talking about Kiefer Sherwood and everything that Sherwood was doing. So I think Brandstrom at different times has stepped up and been a catalyst or gotten them an important goal. So I think you got to give a lot of credit to Patrick Calvin and, once again, the pro scouting staff of the Vancouver Canucks. I mean, without even touching on Lankinen, which is a whole other story and category of praise. But they set out to build a deeper, more balanced team so that they weren't as reliant on 2 lines to score as they were against the Edmonton Oilers and Nashville Predators, Blake, in those playoff series. Mm-hmm. As we saw when the goals dried up from those lines, and particularly from Paterson and Höglander, and the shots really dried up too, right? They didn't have a lot of ammo. They didn't have a lot of arrows in the quiver to beat a team like Edmonton. Heck, it was tough enough against Nashville. So I think a lot of credit is due there, and I think it bodes well for these Canucks as they go through the season and into the playoffs. Now, needless to say, you need Besser, you need Miller, you need Roenick, you need Demko if you're going to go deep in the playoffs. But I think what this stretch has learned us is that these Canucks have more routes to victory perhaps than even last year's Canucks. And that's saying something because that was a pretty darn good team last year.
Well, and this is what we said was the MO, was to just get to this point where you're not so reliant. You've got that depth. And even with injuries now, they've been able to survive that and still get depth scoring. And that's still with no producing Dakota Joshua and a bit of a cooler Brock Besser right now. So, no, all that bodes well. I think everybody sees where the problems are on this team. I mean, it would have been a problem without Kevin Lankinen, but really, we're looking at defense. If the Canucks can figure out a way to shore up the defense, and it doesn't have to be immediately, but before the trade deadline, I think this team has proven that it can raise its level when adversity strikes. They're keeping their head above water right now. Can
I just, and I know I pushed back on this last week, but if you'll allow me,
mm-hmm.
I wholly reject the notion, see where they're at when everyone's back, so long as they're winning, it buys them time. You know what the weaknesses are.
Mm-hmm.
You know you need 1, if not 2, top 4 defensemen. You also see Nils Höglander fading here, asset value fading on top of the goal outages, the points outages. It's just not there. Like, I'm about fixing something before it starts pouring
by
water.
All means,
like taking on water.
By all means,
fix a stitch in time saves 9 sort of.
But you can't force it, man.
I understand that, Blake.
Yeah.
But we're now December. Again, we're past U.S. Thanksgiving. We're past a quarter of the way through the season. Teams know what they are. Teams know what they aren't. I understand what Dreger was telling us yesterday. You got so many teams close enough to the playoff bar that nobody wants to make the first punt of the season, give up on this year. But I do think there's more urgency. You win games in Buffalo and Detroit, and people go, "Oh, okay, well, they're doing well here. No need to." No. You still have urgency. Like if it wasn't plain as day on defense, I would take a different tact here. Last year at this time, after they added Zadorov, it was like, wow, okay, this thing's really going. Then it became a little more apparent that you needed another centerman, and they went out and did the Lindholm deal. But, last year in the early going, it became apparent they needed a defenseman. They went out and got a defenseman.
No, but the winning does just mathematically create less urgency because there are teams that get decimated by injury, and they start to lose because of that. And as a GM, you're looking at going, well, let's not dig ourselves a hole here that we can't get out of. So right now, the Canucks are at least the shovels against the shed right now. There's no hole being dug is more the case rather than, there is no problem. I don't think anybody's fooling themselves into thinking there is no problem, but at least they aren't digging themselves a hole right now. And that's...
Yeah, fair enough. But I look at a Western Conference here, and Blake, you can make the argument we're already down to 9 teams in the Western Conference. Vegas, Vancouver, LA, Minnesota, Winnipeg, Dallas, those teams sitting on divisional playoff spots. Edmonton, the 2 Alberta teams right now on wildcard spots, and then the Colorado Avalanche and Chase. Anaheim, albeit with games in hand, is 5 back of Calgary for the final playoff spot. And let's face it, nobody expected Anaheim to be a playoff team this year anyways.
No.
They're in the midst of a rebuild. Utah's missing 2 of their top defensemen. 5 out in the playoff race. Maybe you believe in St. Louis with the coaching change making a run here. Perhaps the Nashville Predators have another extraordinary winning streak in them this year.
But they're so far in arrears, I don't think so.
Yeah, but when I look at the West, I see 6 to 7 teams that are pretty much out of it right now. And, cast over to the East, Montreal for sure. Pittsburgh may want to kid themselves some more, but okay. Ottawa's real close to being out of it. Detroit, real close to being out of it. So, I think you're already looking at close to a third of the league from which you can do some shopping.
I will go out on the limb and say one of, at least, St. Louis, Utah, or Seattle will get on a roll, figure their stuff out, and be back into it.
Well, usually it's at least 3, but no more than 5 or 6, and those are really outlier years. If you're looking at the 3 teams that were below the playoff bar in U.S. Thanksgiving and are going to get above the playoff bar, I think you make a good case for the Colorado Avalanche. Get some goaltending, and you're probably better than Calgary, and we'll probably get there. And then probably a couple of teams in that crowded East by the playoff bar, right? And if it was Boston, I don't think anyone would be surprised. Maybe another one. So I think we're starting to separate the wheat from the chaff here, is what I'm saying. And so I would suspect that the Canucks, true to their form, Rutherford's been the biggest early mover in the league, are looking at making those corrections, making those fixes on defense sooner rather than later.
Let me ask you this. Apparently, there's talk of Jim Rutherford going back to Pittsburgh for a Matt Cullen night.
Yeah. I was surprised to read that's his first time going back to Pittsburgh, but I know things didn't particularly end well there with management and the new owners. So
he's going there for a reason, to vet Matt Cullen. But,
yeah.
I mean,
think he's going to take a moment with Marcus Peters?
Yeah, maybe.
Or Kyle Dubas?
Never know.
Yeah. The other thing we should mention with regards to the Canucks and how they're getting it done, and Drance wrote a good piece about this in The Athletic. The margins of victory in the National Hockey League are so slim, day-to-day, game-to-game. They've got one more power play goal than they have shorthanded goal allowed on this trip. They've won 2 overtime periods because they have the maestro, Quinn Hughes, right? And that has basically been 2 additional points. They've been efficient at hitting empty nets to prevent teams from coming back on them. And, they've had Lankinen playing his guts out.
Which, by the way, the empty net thing is a sneaky thing, which they have practiced.
Yep.
In fact.
We saw it.
Yes.
Talk in practice. You missed the empty net. You needed to take a laugh.
Right? You end a game.
Yeah, exactly.
You end a game.
That's the kill shot.
And you also, think about how much energy is expended, especially against your better players generally, defending a one-goal game for that final 90 seconds where you're asking them to extend themselves. The risk of injury increases tenfold in those sorts of moments as well. If you can...
You're blocking shots usually,
There's
right?
that too. I just mean even literally extending yourself and the risk of tears and stuff. But yeah, those are those little minor things that we're figuring out in all of sport.
And really, they have made a difference on this trip. I thought that was a heads-up piece from Trance. Okay, we have to talk about the New York Rangers. They lose 5-1 to their rival New Jersey Devils last night, and let's go Devils chants break out at the Garden.
Well, it's 4-0 at the halfway mark of the game. It's over.
James Dolan, the owner there, must have been fuming.
Yeah.
It's for buzz. You're hearing "Let's go Devils" chants from, the Devils aren't even the stepbrother there, right? That's the Islanders. Well, you're talking about the illegitimate bastard brother.
And Matt, you can believe it that a lot of those chanting were Rangers fans that had had enough. That's not all just Devils fans drowning out the Rangers fans. Those are cheeky Rangers fans that are wanting some change.
Your general manager, Chris Drury, sends a memo out when really, your team was underachieving a little bit because you were the President's Trophy winners from last year, but
12-7-1.
We're 12-7-1. He sends a memo to his 31 colleagues saying everybody's available, including Chris Kreider, the longest tenured Ranger, and Jacob Trouba, the captain. That looks like it has backfired. I've been following Larry Brooks on X, the longtime New York Post chronicler of the Rangers, and he's talking about there's no emotion there. Yesterday, Larry pointed out that it was nearly half an hour after the game and Laviolette had not emerged to meet the press, which he said extremely unusual. Greg Wyshynski of ESPN, the Rangers are going to do something so epically panicked, it's going to be great content.
Yeah, and so per our poll question, honestly,
well, that's it.
If you get a team panicking,
I don't think that Patrick Allvin wants to trade JT Miller. JT Miller has a no-move clause and thus can scuttle any potential deal. Now, would Miller say no to New York City from? Because it's a chance to right the wrong there, right?
Yeah.
He never really launched.
And it's New York City.
It's New York freaking City. Who says no to NYC? But if I'm Patrick Allvin, and I know how much Chris Drury covets JT, I think you absolutely have to have a dialogue there day to day. If not a couple times a day, just to see if they're willing to make a gross overpay just to fix their shit in the here and now.
And
it's an emotionally erratic owner there, too, who has gotten involved when the club has struggled, when he hasn't liked what he has seen from his club, and oftentimes that's about fight, emotion, passion. He's hearing "Let's Go Devils" chants in his building, the world's most famous arena. It just seems like all the conditions are ripe there to be able to go in and fleece the New York Rangers. And what would a fleecing of the New York Rangers look like in terms of a JT Miller trade? Wow, that is a blockbuster monster deal. You have to be willing to consider that if you're Allvin, even if you don't necessarily want to move the player, even if the player doesn't necessarily want to move.
Again, we're way down hypothetical boulevard here, but I think Quinn Hughes is really the only untradeable player on the Vancouver Canucks. For the wide swath of fans. If it was a democracy with a vote, I would guess that comes out in the wash.
I think there are a ton of fans that would not want to trade JT Miller, Elias Pettersson,
right,
Thatcher Demko, or Philip Rodak.
It would still do numbers.
But
Yeah.
Hughes is the only guy where you don't even take the call.
It's pretty close to unanimous, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But
like, unless Colorado calls and says, say, Makar for Hughes, like, it would have to be something ridiculous like that.
JT Miller, if you go to the lab and try to create a guy that performs for you in the playoffs, he's the 3D printed NHL player that you want. So, like, it has to get stupid. It would have to get stupid. But where is that one in the comments here? Nello in the YouTube comments. Rangers going to pull some desperate bending moves. If you get the Rangers pulling some desperate
it would not
moves,
surprise me at this point.
Yeah.
Because, here's the other dynamic there. Chris Drury. How many teams would Chris Drury have been a GM candidate with? Now, he served his apprenticeship in the front office.
He did, yeah.
So, you
wonder about his savvy to pull off a good trade?
What I mean is, if you're Chris Drury and you're a hockey manager, or you want to be a hockey manager, and you're a Connecticut guy, like, you're in the dream job, right?
Yeah.
Like, you live in Manhattan.
Yeah.
Your workplace is Madison Square Garden. You have to toe the line with the owner upstairs. And it's typically when owners get involved, or when owners are applying pressure, even if they're not necessarily involved in the mechanics, that you get these sort of desperation trades. I guess what I'm saying is, Drury has to look around and go, how many levers do I have here? I can make a trade. I mean, I suppose you could fire the coach. I'm not a huge Laviolette fan personally, but he has had success in the National Hockey League. You've changed coaches a fair bit there. So, yeah.
But the thing is the only way I think a lot of Canucks fans...
The earth is trembling under you if you're Drury, is what I'm saying.
The only way I think Canucks fans, and even Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford, would even remotely consider something like this is if you got younger pieces coming back the other way. And I'll spitball and say, beginning with pieces like Keandre Miller and a Filipino sort of thing. Except from the Rangers' perspective, and again, maybe they are this stupid, maybe they are this... you become a really old team if you're the Rangers and you pull off a trade like that.
Yeah, and I've read that some people think their window is closed. I don't necessarily agree with that. I still think that this is a team that could...
they've got some younger defensemen.
And the goaltender is
Hedl
magnificent. I know he's not having his best year, but the goaltender is magnificent there.
Yeah. They do have to get rid of some of those older guys, though.
Well... They do, but I think if you're the Canucks, you're probably not targeting the older guys.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm with
the
you.
Canucks do not pull off that deal.
I'm Hedl over Trocheck. I'm Miller over Trouba. I'm, even Rempty.
Like the Canucks, I see Rangers fans in various chats on this are trying to peddle Zibanejad the other way. Can I start getting older in this?
Well, no, and Zibanejad's a full no move.
Yeah. But again, they might be willing to leave the sinking ship that is the Rangers.
Maybe.
Yeah. And Kreider, really nice player. You're not getting a 33-year-old back in a trade like that. It's not happening.
Plus winger.
Yeah.
Not a center. But, here's the thing. As much as it's louder on Broadway, the volume is increasing here too. The aforementioned Andy Strickland wondering on his pod, if it's not substance abuse related with JT, and everybody, nobody has said that, and typically there are announcements from the NHL and NHLPA when a player enters the program. None have been forthcoming. Nobody has gotten any information that it's along those lines. Strickland wonders, look, he's been an emotional guy, also emotionally erratic. He has crossed the line with teammates in the past. Is that what happened here after that night where he gets benched? Did he cross the line behind the scenes and talk it in the team? Because remember, the Canucks did not say whether this was at JT's behest or the team's behest or a combination thereof, this leave of absence.
You can twist yourself in a knots 1,000 ways coming up with all the, taking one small little thing again. Well, because nobody announced it, maybe it's you could do that all
No, but
day
they were asked
long.
they were asked, Blake, and they did not provide a clear answer. So that feels a little more speculation.
I'm sure it does, but it's just
talk it. How's your relationship with JT? Well, ask him. And then goes on to say, oh, I think it's great. Alvin, we hope that JT becomes a better player and better person after this. We have resources available to him at the team and league level. So, there's enough breadcrumbs here. I saw the Chicklets guys again talking about this, talking about the dynamic in the room with Paterson and Miller. We know they're not best buddies. They're talking about how Paterson's flourishing now. And that when Miller comes back, it's got to work with EP. If it doesn't, and I know, last week we both said, look, do not draw a straight line between Elias Pettersson's production and JT Miller's absence, because the production was coming before JT left. The vibes, the smiles, the body language, the attitude, everything that improved with Paterson was happening with JT in the lineup.
Yeah.
But also, if it goes on long enough with Paterson flourishing with Miller out of the lineup, you do have to wonder. Diametrically opposed personalities. JT's a Popovsky. Elias is a very measured and considered speaker. Elias is a cerebral guy. JT is governed by emotions.
But the thing to remember here is it's not like Elias Pettersson wants to have the spotlight on him. Miller doesn't mind it at all. So it's not like Pettersson's thinking he's stealing my spotlight. Pettersson doesn't want the spotlight.
No, I don't think it's that. I think it's more team dynamic. I think it's more team room dynamic, teammate dynamic.
I know, we're just slicing it pretty thin there, because even on the ice, they're not dependent on each other on the ice
I
at
think
all.
if JT says something, he's got a bunch of minions that are ready to follow him. And I think Elias sometimes looks at that and goes, okay.
I mean, based on what we're seeing on the bench, when you see those bench shots nowadays, Pettersson's got some friends on the bench and he's doing just fine.
Completely.
He's not.
I think JT takes up a lot of oxygen in the room.
And certainly
I think sometimes that annoys some of his teammates. I think it annoyed Horvat. I think it annoys Paterson.
I was going to say, the old JT Miller, I absolutely agree. Yeah. There was very few signs of that sort of behavior the last 24 months.
No, the emotion is still there, Blake.
Oh, the emotion is there.
But the willingness to talk on behalf of the team, like it's my team sort of thing, that is all still there.
But the channeling of it for good rather than evil.
The channeling has gotten a lot
better.
I mean, some of the defensive shifts, some of the defensive assignments, and the way he handled them, marvelous.
Mm-hmm.
When you get that guy, worth his weight in gold. A superior two-way hockey player he turned himself into in this market. Took the wake-up call of the Tampa trade, recognized what AV told him way back when. You're going to be a great AHL player. Unless you want to work, in which case you're going to be a great NHL player. And he applied it, and it manifested here in Vancouver.
And
it was an extraordinary story, and full credit to JT Miller for recognizing that and turning himself into a better player and turning himself into a better person.
If he had taken a
now
leave,
another ripple here.
If he had taken a leave after one of the notable stick smashes in years gone by, I think people would have been like, okay, that all tracks. What's interesting to me is, of course, we've seen him in such calm waters here lately that.
Winning helps, but
no, but they still lost games. He was frustrated with himself. How many games did we hear him talking afterwards about how frustrated he was? If the timing was different, not what you would have expected.
I hear what you're saying, but I think anger management problems remain.
I mean, again, you can speculate till you're blue in the face. You could easily suggest that it's a pressure that he feels on himself.
Yep.
I mean, you can cut it a million.
Which could also fall under anger management. Anyways, we'll see. But the Canucks are back here. I suspect they'll practice Thursday after a day off tomorrow, and so We'll see if there's any kind of update on JT Miller. We can't update you on Andrei Kuzmenko. He'll be a healthy scratch tonight.
Yes, he will be.
Let's get to today's menu.
Although, what I am a little bit, wary of, just from a Canuck fan perspective, this Thatcher Demko thing has, in the last 3 weeks, it's felt more and more imminent. Like, remember, like second week of November, everybody was pretty convinced. Okay, by December the 1st, that seemed pretty safe. Well, we're past December the 1st
December
here.
the 3rd.
And we're still not hearing of any imminent return. Like, it just time keeps on ticking. We'll see.
Isn't that a song?
Time keeps on ticking. Yeah, Steve Miller.
Is it Steve Miller band?
Yeah.
Okay. You're pretty good on music. I'll take your word for it.
Thanks.
How much Taylor Swift can you sing?
Just by osmosis, a fair amount.
By osmosis,
Yeah.
I know quite a few of the songs actually.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get to today's menu.
Yeah, we can move on.
It's brought to you by Greta. Greta, fantastic spot to catch all the games, home and away. We'll be there for Canucks Army viewing parties this season. We already had one. Going to have some more. I think January's the next one. Minutes from the arena, steps from the stadium. Come by pregame, postgame. Check out the great street food menu, the arcade that encircles the bar, weekly drink specials. Greta, the place to be, 50 West Cordova. Let the games begin. John Shannon's going to join us. We'll talk about this Rangers matter, but also about Quinn Hughes and his trophy candidacies, and also about Pius Suter and what he's up to, as well as the Four Nations face-off, those rosters being released tomorrow. But we're already getting word of some of the play. They asked for the teams to be set and sent in on Sunday for a big reveal on Thursday. In the interim, you have players who are being told yes or no. We find out that Nick Suzuki is not going to be on the team from Montreal. The Flyers have a celebration on ice at their practice because Travis Sanheim, who was kind of a bubble guy for the Canadian defense, as well as Ristolainen, and I believe there's another player there. Konechny, yes. All Team Canada have all been told. Why are you waiting 3 days for your big reveal on these things?
Well, particularly because we don't have a lot of best on best right now, Matt. There's a lot of guys that are being chosen for the first time.
This thing was cloak and dagger. Remember, Eisman ran the Olympic team? It was cloak and freaking dagger until the reveal on TSN, and then don't dare ask him about a guy who wasn't on the team.
But if we were having best and best every 2 years regularly, there'd be a little bit of old hat to it, and you wouldn't have guys brimming with excitement about it. Because we don't have it anymore.
No, I know.
Like, guys are pumped to get the call, and they're going to tell a person or two.
I didn't get that. Ask them to put the rosters in. Do you need 3 days to tell everyone?
No.
Make your round of phone calls. You got a lot of AGMs there on top of the manager.
Do it the next day.
And then just do it the next day.
Yeah.
So we'll talk to John about that. Cam Robinson as well is going to stop by. We'll talk Miller, Höglander. Cam's got some ideas on trade fits with Columbus, and of course Cam has got all the prospects covered. So we'll talk about these upcoming drafts, whether it's worth the Canucks while to trade their first round picks, not to mention a very, very contentious World Junior camp for Canada. Whoa, the level of player and the number of high-end players that they have left off, even the camp roster. Like, they didn't even want to see them. These
are the long lists.
Wow.
Really.
Exactly. Time now for our Bet365 bets of the day. I regret to report that Blake has kept the heater going. He texted me last night after Jameis Winston throws that pick six and goes, "That's another cover."
You're going to have to be more specific.
I went,
the second pick six.
Yeah, and I said, well, hey, now, not so fast. Still a minute and change left. If Jameis leads them down, scores a touchdown, then it's a backdoor cover, Cleveland +6. The last, Jameis decides, I'm going to throw it to another Bronco, this time in the end zone. And so he covers again. He retains the honor. If you've been betting with Blake over the last 6 days, boy, made a dent in that mortgage.
Enjoy your new house.
Absolutely. What you got tonight?
By the way, would that not have been the strangest? Like, if that third pick, and it could have gone for 6 as well, he would have thrown for 4 TDs and had 3 pick sixes. He already is the first ever to go 4 TDs and 2 pick sixes.
I read something, and I'll see if I can get it quickly, that when you add the here it is, OptiStats. Jameis threw for 497 yards. The Broncos also had 171 yards in interception returns. 668 combined passing yards plus interception yards. New NFL record.
Yeah, I would guess. I would guess. And again, if that third one goes all the way back, it's all up over 700.
Say what you will about Jameis, that he's been a bust as a first overall, but man, is he entertaining.
He is fun to watch. Okay, so tonight, Canucks and Wild. I know I've got to hang, given the streak, I do have to hang my hat on one of them, these goal-scoring props. You'll want to say Besser at plus 190. I'm just going to give you that number because I think you should know it.
Mm-hmm.
But in my gut, my best bet, Elias Pettersson at plus 220. For as good as he's played,
anytime goal scorer.
Yes, for as good as he's played, the goals haven't been super gaudy, right? A lot of primary assists has been his thing lately. Yeah. I think he's due for a goal, so I'm going to put him down.
Last game, a long road trip, knowing it's already been a successful one. You're playing with house money. Third straight start for Lankinen. Talking last week, talking about how Lankinen's level dropped when he started playing him too much. Still missing Miller and Roenick. I think the Canucks are in tough tonight, so I'm going with Minnesota on the money line at minus 140. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION when opening that account. John Shannon coming up next.
I'll be honest, I don't get to many games anymore, whether it be at the arena or the stadium. Ticket availability cost, it's a bit of an issue these days. So I prefer to go where there's atmosphere, and I know I can get in. Greta Bar YVR. Soak up all the atmosphere with your fellow fans and enjoy a great night with a great street food menu. I prefer the poutine. Weekly drink specials as well at Greta Bar YVR at 50 West Cordova. And we'll be having our viewing parties there all season long as well. Your pregame, your postgame, it's at Greta Bar YVR, 50 West Cordova. Let the games begin.
Sekeres and Price from the historic Wall Center.
Well, now both Black Friday and Cyber Monday are in our rearview mirror, but we're celebrating for the rest of the week here with our Nation Gear. Go to nationgear.ca for the hockey fan in your life. Get them some of the classics from the Nation Network. There's also a new My City collection that should be revered. And if you've got a hockey lover in your life, you're looking for that perfect gift, that unique gift, nationgear.ca has got it. And if you spend a little bit more, of course, you end up saving money because you get free shipping. Anything over $200 gets you free shipping. But, of course, don't leave it to the last second. A, get the better price if you do it now, and B, get the peace of mind of knowing it's in the house well before the date, if you will. So don't wait on the sidelines. It's 1 week only. Shop now at nationgear.ca.
Do you still go to the mailbox daily because it's so ingrained in your routine and go, oh, yeah, they're on strike? No mail.
Well, I'm waiting for a credit card.
Yeah.
My credit card compromised.
Every day I come home from work and I open the mailbox just because it's such a part of my routine. And every day I'm reminded, oh, yeah, it's empty again. Here's John Shannon, the former executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada, the most famous man in Oliver. From Oliver.
You guys have a tough life, eh? Worried about Canada Post. So,
hey, if anything, it reminds people that it's a necessity of life still in today's day and age.
Well, others are taking harsher views there and saying, no, they're so useless and this is proving it. But
go to your bank. They'll courier it to your bank, Blake.
Yeah, I could if I'm feeling that. I just feel like this is going to be solved. It's Christmas, for God's sakes. Like, this is a big. You'd think this thing would get solved. Like, airline strikes never happen anymore because it's too critical.
No.
I'm actually on my way this afternoon to Pittsburgh, and I'm going to do all my U.S. mailings and my international mailings from Pittsburgh tomorrow. So
that's very smart. Well done. What's taking you to Pittsburgh?
Tomorrow night in Pittsburgh is the Lester Patrick Awards, and our friend Sam Rosen is being honored with the Lester Patrick Award. And I have known Sam for all those 40 years that he's been the voice of the Rangers, and we have a great many mutual friends that have worked alongside him. So I thought it was important to be there to support him.
You're such a good Boy, everybody needs a John Shannon
Yeah,
in
no
their
kidding.
corner.
Cheerleader.
He goes far and wide to support his friends getting all these awards from coast to coast to coast. Well done, John. And since
Sam's a good man.
he is, and he calls a terrific game.
Yeah,
And the other thing, Frank Corrado was saying this to us a couple weeks ago because he's relatively new to a television broadcast booth. He said we were down in New York to do a game, and he goes, "There's Sam Rosen, 40 years deep, going into both dressing rooms, pulling aside specific guys, asking specific questions. Like he knew what he needed that night to make the broadcast go. Not obviously, of course, not just the play-by-play, but the little vignettes in between whistles and whatnot." And he said, "I'm sitting there watching this, Hall of Famer, 40-year guy sit there and work as hard as he would have in his first week on the job."
Yeah,
so,
that's good.
yeah,
It's a great lesson to see. And Sam's one of those guys. Not only would he do that and have great respect for the athletes and the coaches, but then he would probably go to the other broadcasters and say, "Hey, what do you need from me?" And then offer a couple of, whether it's statistics or information, or probably some rather open opinions about what's going on with the New York Rangers that people would appreciate Sam even more. He's just one of the greatest people our industry has ever had, and I'm thrilled that he's being honored.
What about your opinion on the New York Rangers right now, John? Are they about to make a trade just to shake things up here? Boy, is that becoming a cranky situation in the Big Apple.
It is ugly. There is no question about it. And, they don't play until Friday now, Matt. And you do have to wonder if Chris Drury is up to something. And the other thing about the next three games, you look at the three games. Pittsburgh, they're supposed to be better than Pittsburgh. Seattle, they're supposed to be better than Seattle. And let me just check what the third team is, because there's three and Chicago. So they're all at home at the Garden.
Boy.
This is a watershed moment, I think, for the New York Rangers this week. And you can rest assured that James Dolan, who thought he had created, with Peter Laviolette as his coach and Drury as the manager, a Stanley Cup contender, you can bet that James Dolan is not very happy with what has gone on. I asked some people last night after the game that they lost to the Devils, and said, "So is Laviolette in trouble?" And their answer was he shouldn't be, because it's not on him. He has tried his best. That's why you're starting to hear the Kreiders and the Trouba names out there. Now, Kreider missed 3 games from injury and has come back and has played okay in the games he's played, but they beat Montreal on Saturday afternoon, and then they lost to a really good Devils team last night.
So let me ask you this. Do you think it is so desperate that they would go and overpay for JT Miller?
I'm following this on social media. I even saw the question of the day, the poll. I mean, I know nothing of what JT's issues are, but the Vancouver Canucks should not be contemplating this anyway. Period. End of story. JT Miller is too valuable to the Canucks. Why would you ever consider thinking that he would be more valuable than another team? Because I still believe in the Canucks, with or without Miller, and I think Miller will be a real positive, even though the team has played so well, particularly on the road.
It would only be in the case of an overpayment, I think, that people would even entertain the thought, because I think everybody's of the same mind of what JT Miller brings to the table. But you never know when somebody gets desperate. My question with regards to Drury's desperation is that I believe they were 12-7-1 when the email was apparently sent out. And apparently there's no debating this. The Drury let everybody in the NHL know we're basically open for business here, particularly on these two players being Kreider and Trouba. But they were 12-7-1 at that point. Mm-hmm. And they've only gone worse since then. It got public, but he had to know that it would get public. Did this cause this further degradation of the team, or did he just know that this degradation was going to happen and he was trying to get ahead of it?
I think managers and coaches have a good sense of where their teams are and what is right or wrong with their teams. and never talk about it publicly. Probably they do talk about it a lot behind closed doors. So he could probably see this happening, and this is, compounded by the Shesterkin contract situation as well. So, and the whole concept of he knew or he assumed it would get out, I just can't believe that he thought that other managers would leak it out. I mean, there's supposed to be a trust factor, honor amongst thieves, if you will. And so I think that there's probably a little disappointment that he has probably, and it'll probably come up at the next managers meeting. Well, guys, if we're going to talk to each other, we've got to keep it confidential. I remember George McPhee.
Well, but
George, just as an aside, George McPhee stood up at one managers meeting that I was at and said, "Boys, there's too much news that we talk about internally amongst us," and there was only 31 teams at the time. Why is this all out in the public? Can we try to keep a secret? and he got a few chuckles, but a lot of guys agreeing. But it just never happens. It just doesn't happen.
I understand that would make George's life easier, but my response would be, why isn't it all out there? Like, look what goes on the baseball hot stove and how it draws interest. Like, look what happens in the NBA where it's an open secret anytime someone.
Hockey, you know how conservative.
No, I know, but this is what's got to change, Sean. This is what's got to change in terms of promotion and marketing of the sport. Like, this is all fun, and I fail to believe that he didn't think somebody would leak the memo that people were available there. I do wonder whether the two names, Kreider and Trouba, of course, the longest tenured in as captain, is what bothered him. And I don't blame him for being bothered on that, because I think those two guys probably run the room, and I think that's caused a pretty difficult dynamic.
Well, Jacob Trouba has been out there. Remember all the controversy about what's going on in the summertime too with Detroit. Right. So from that perspective, the Kreider one, I think, was the one that surprised a lot of people. For
sure. The Norris Derby is back on, John, with our boy Quinn Hughes and Cale Makar, and we'll see if other names get added to that list as the season.
Josh Morrissey on that list.
Okay, yep. No, that's fair, because he's going to be on Team Canada, the Four Nations. What do you think? Are your people around the league starting to talk about Hughes as a Hart Trophy candidate? Do you think that is going to get some momentum here with him leading the Canucks in scoring and helping them win games with Demko, Miller, and Hronek all missing?
It's funny. I have not heard Quinn's name for the Hart. And you bring it up on a day where he is probably facing the number one candidate for the Hart Trophy in Kaprizov in Minnesota, which has really, I think, raised a lot of eyebrows that Kirill has played so well for a team that is, I guess now arguably the best story in hockey in the Minnesota Wild. So what might be an interesting night to compare notes between Hughes and Kaprizov if we're going to start to put Quinn in that discussion of the Hart Trophy. I'm still a believer that Norris Trophy's enough for a guy like Quinn, but the Canucks road record has been so impressive that, you have to give due to someone. And, other than Kevin Lankinen, I think Quinn Hughes has to be at the top of the list, particularly without Miller in the lineup. So I would not be surprised to hear more about Hughes and the Hart. I also think that a lot of people are doing what I am doing, and I'm waiting for the Four Nations face-off to start to put together lists for trophies, because I think we're going to get a better sense of how good certain players are when they are together for those games in Montreal and Boston.
As far as Hughes for the Hart, I mean, it's just a lot of it's a gut thing here, John, where you just realize on a night-to-night basis, it's him that drags the Canucks into the fight. That's him that is the catalyst for everything. A little bit different in the Cale Makar sense, where Cale's one of those fabulous weapons of the Colorado Avalanche, but it feels like Nathan McKinnon's the one that drags them into the fight every night.
I can understand that. McKinnon's prolific that way, but at the same time, Cale Makar has just been spectacular, even when the team has not played well. He's had a pretty good season after a slow start.
Suter. I was going to go to Demko, first of all. I mean, it looked like there was all this momentum that he would maybe get a start sometime in the middle to the end of this road trip, and yet here we are. Are you getting skeptical at all, or do you still think it's everything's on track here for Demko in the not too distant future?
I think I said last week Christmas, and you guys rolled your eyes at me, but so I'm going to. And by the way, I'm in no hurry right now. Mm-hmm. I really am in no hurry. I just want him to be 100%. So if Lankinen can keep it up, and there's no reason to think he can't, then let Demko and give him the extra time. You know, I mean, you're going to have to find a way to, pick and choose when Shilov gets a start. But at the same time, Kevin Lankinen has done what he was supposed to do and more. And this has allowed Demko to take more time and not feel the pressure to come back early, which I think he did feel previous times when he was injured. And certainly the messaging he has created is, I'm not coming back until I'm 100% this time. And so I'm in no hurry right now, as long as this team can keep doing what it's doing, or as Rick Tocchet says, win ugly. But that's okay. There's no column in the standings for UWs, for ugly wins. It's just W's. And
tonight might be ugly.
Fair.
Yeah.
However, there are columns for RWs and ROWs.
No, that's a fair comment. That's a fair comment.
Yes.
Just don't
You have three different categories of wins in this league, Shannon. It's unbelievable.
But there's no UWs.
No UWs. Do people in Toronto know Pius Suter? Do people across the country know who Pius Suter is, or are they just finding out?
Nope. No, I don't think that there's, these late games. I think people are, when you look at the stats, you're going, who the heck is this guy and what has he done and how important is he? When the team comes east, the epiphany that occurs. Wow, Rick Tocchet's done a good job. Wow, Pius Suter is playing pretty well. Wow, Kevin Lankinen might be the best free agent signing of the summer. I mean, it truly is at times amazing. The awareness that when you are stuck with, for the most part, 35 10 p.m. starts, 36 10 p.m. starts Eastern time, that people just don't pay attention until the next morning.
So you're telling me people are sleeping on Pius Suter. Okay, gotcha.
I think sleeping on a few guys on that roster, by the way.
I know you don't sleep on it. John's up to one every night watching all the West Coast games.
Yeah, because
I know this because he sometimes texts me at like 9:15 Pacific time, where I'm more likely to be asleep than John is. And I will also acknowledge this. Damn it, and I hate myself for it, but when I covered the Leafs, everything was about the Leafs. The bubble was so strong. If I considered players from outside of the Toronto Maple Leafs dressing room, it was only in the vein of, might they one day be a Leaf? And you see that sometimes when Western teams go.
This is coming from the guy, Blake, that just asked me if Toronto knows Suter, right?
No, I know. I know. Fair enough. I answer my own question.
We do like to know if. Do you see us? Do we look pretty tonight?
No, for me, it's more about needling. Like, you really should get to know these players who play on the West Coast.
But actually, you bring up
decent hockey players out here.
You bring up a really good point about Toronto, to the point where I now feel guilty talking about the Maple Leafs.
You should. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Like, for instance, I actually told somebody this morning, I think William Nylander is the second best winger in the National Hockey League right now. I think he's that
behind
good.
Kaprizov.
Behind Kaprizov.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. William Nylander is just phenomenal. And
you're not allowed to say that on this show, John.
What? Yeah, I know.
You're not allowed to say that on this show.
No, but in some ways, it's the right choice because
he is pretty damn good.
But Nylander was so vilified by the Toronto media, by some of the Toronto media, that
I think that's part of it.
Yeah. I like cheering for him because it sticks it to the Toronto media that we're cheering for him.
Who
Or
wanted
cheering
to get
against
rid of
perfect.
him
Yeah,
1 year
yeah.
when he had no contract in
Exactly.
December? Okay.
Well, and if we can start talking about worrying about Joey Daccord making the face-off team, why don't we talk about William Nylander making it too? He was born in Calgary. Come on.
Do you think Daccord would actually play for Canada?
I don't know, and quite frankly, I don't.
He's got to
care.
satisfy paperwork.
No, it's done. It's been approved.
Oh, really?
It's ready to roll.
Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of, last question here, but where do you sense the interest is amongst hockey fans for Four Nations and the announcement they're making later this week on the team composition?
It's funny. I did if you go to my X feed, I actually did a poll last night for 24 hours. Is this must-see TV, or is this a 2-week vacation for you from hockey? And right now it's about 50-50. So I think that there's huge interest in it. And I think as we get closer to the date, the interest will grow. I think we'll probably be 70-30 by the time we get to the 1st of February. So, but right now, people are, and some people make some silly comments, but they're talking that it's not the best on best yet. Where are the Russians? Why aren't the Czechs there, or the Slovaks or others? But right now, the poll is running 50-50.
It's incredible. You're 1,700 votes in. Must See TV has 49.4% of the vote. Vacation from Hockey is 50.6%. You're in Bush Gore Quebec referendum territory here, Shannon, in terms of margins. So I'll say this. I think this week will be a test. I haven't sensed a ton of interest from our audience to date. In fact, I've seen more of, gosh, I hope Demko doesn't play. We need him fresh for the playoffs. My own personal take on this is I have some interest, but I think it's fueled by the fact we haven't had best on best for the last 2 Olympics, and I'm so jonesing for a best on best. This is not ideal. It's a small tournament. I'm with John. I prefer the broader tournament with the upset possibilities and all of that. I don't like the fact that it is an NHLPA cash grab. It's not the Olympics, but I do have some interest. And I do wonder whether the naming of the teams later this week will fuel a little bit more of it.
I want to see Canada-US. I mean, am I really going to carve out time? Am I going to say, oh, guys, we have to be in place for Canada versus Finland? Like, it's not going to happen.
It's only 7 games. Guys, let's face it. It's a placeholder for the World Cup that's going to come if and when we can get everybody in the hockey world on the same page. And there's no guarantee at this point we're going to get everybody in the hockey world on the same page for a long period of time.
Well, and I'll say this is once you are back to the Olympics, to me that's the big enchilada. The World Cup is,
which is not a cash grab for the players or the league. It's just a cash grab for the IOC.
For a different
It's
group.
a cash grab for the IOC, but it's also one of the most coveted prizes in global sport and has been for a century and a half. Right, like it's got a history and a brand that resonates with sports fans.
Sure, we're all going to love the Italy thing. It's going to be spectacular in 2026.
Yep. Yes, we will. You're spectacular. Thank you for this, John. Great poll. Until next week, keep an eye on Pius Suter. He can play.
I'll tell my friends in Toronto. I have to find a friend in Toronto first.
And Hughes for Hart while you're at it as well. Just berate them with your West Coast takes.
Cheers, boys.
If you are struggling with things like managing stress, anxiety, relationships, or divorce, reach out to the counselors at Advanced Counseling. Book your free initial consultation today at advancedcounseling.ca.
Sekeres and Price from the historic Wall Center. This next segment brought to you by Ben Moss. Ben Moss, proudly Canadian-owned, operated, a history dating back more than a century. 5 locations here in British Columbia, including Willowbrook and Langley, Coquitlam Center, committed to customer satisfaction. Check out the large selection of Canadian mined diamonds, lab-grown diamonds. They got mined diamonds with payment plans to suit your needs. For more information, check out benmoss.com. Ben Moss, for the love of jewelry. Ken Robinson is the Director of Content for Elite Prospects, and he joins us on Tuesdays. How you doing?
I'm doing well, fellas. How you guys doing?
Yeah, good. We're going to get into your wheelhouse here with prospects and the World Juniors coming up. But first, some Vancouver Canucks talk. What do you make of the JT Miller trade talk with the New York Rangers? Cam, do you think that Chris Drury and the Rangers are so desperate now that they are willing to overpay, move sun, moon, and stars to get JT Miller back on Broadway?
Because they are on fire in the bad way right now, the New York Rangers.
You know, they always say you don't know you're in the good old days until they're gone. And I think last season was the last of the good old days for this Rangers core. But if they believe in their heart of hearts that they're like, we can still push, we've got a contention window that's still just squeaking open. And if we hammer it open with JT Miller, maybe, you know, you can throw some anvils at him, throw some trade offers that really, you know, benefit the Canucks a ton. Obviously, JT's got to sign off on it. Whoever's coming back from the Rangers has probably got a no trade or a no move. They got to sign off on it. Mid-season trades, dealing with guys that are making $7-8 million or packages that are going up that high, it's difficult to do. But you know, if it's Keandre Miller's coming back as part of the package, you know, someone that could really help the blue line out for a long time. You know, so Lafreniere, I very much doubt it. But a collection of picks and prospects attached, it's all pretty far-fetched, I would think, at this point. But I do think the Rangers are just ripe to make a real panic move here, and someone could benefit from it.
It's a weird scenario for the Canucks too, given where JT Miller is at right now on a personal leave. Like, not that they're fanning the flames here, but it puts them in a weird light because, you know, to be even fielding is strong because nothing prevents a team from calling, obviously, but even listening to offers from another GM, it's just an awkward moment right now for the Canucks.
It is, and I'm sure Alvin's probably just saying that right off the hop. Is like, you know, nothing's getting done until JT comes back, and you know, he's ready to come back, and so I'm sure that is you be derelict in your duties to not answer the phone and listen to what people have to say. But you're right, it is just a very odd, awkward situation with this player that, you know, is away from the team for whatever reason. They hope that he comes back and he's healthy and mentally ready to go, and then maybe you look at it, and if, you know, some of the whispers are, you know, that there is some contention in that dressing room. You probably would have known that before you gave him that big contract. You probably would have known that before you gave Paterson that big contract. See, you went in with your eyes wide open. So this shouldn't be news to the Canucks. I guess it just matters if they think that they can really improve their team by moving Miller. And that's kind of the end of the day question.
A lot easier to just move Niels Höglander, isn't it?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Who's going to get to that?
Improve that way.
Yeah. And in that regard, you know, like there's lots of talk. I do think that Höglander, we're saying that they're answering the phone. I think they're probably picking up the phone a little bit more with Höglander too. You know, I saw Dollywell talking about Columbus is super interested. You know, is it Cole Sillinger? Is it a guy like Jordan Harris, who, you know, more of a bottom of the lineup on the blue line, who can play both sides? You know, he could fill in on the left, he can fill in on the right. He's in sheltered minutes. He's a pretty useful player. He had some pedigree that hasn't really matched up yet. But to me, I just keep coming back to Marcus Pettersson. Get all the Petterssons, bring them all into town, and have a good time with it. Because in the short term, he can replace Hronek on that top pair, you know, adequately. And then when Hronek's back healthy, he slides down, he kicks Susie down, everything kind of slides down. He's not a right shot guy, I know. And he's a UFA, so you're paying something for a guy that you probably can't keep or might not be able to keep. But for right here and now, he probably makes the most sense on paper.
So you'd be comfortable with him on the right side, Cam? Like, he's played the right side adequately, Pettersson?
He has played some there. I mean, I don't know. I honestly don't know if that's what they would want to do, or if they just keep Myers up there and they'd slide him onto the second pair.
What about you did mention Severson or Provorov there in Columbus? Severson, it's an onerous contract. Provorov, well, you tell me, why not Severson or Provorov?
Yeah, Severson, I just wouldn't want to commit to that deal long term. Probably, maybe the pro scouts in Vancouver disagree with that. Provorov, I'd be okay with, just because the contract isn't too ornery, and he's a good player. He has been a better player at times, and I think that if you put him into a really strong leadership group and with Rick Tocchet at the helm, maybe that could work out in the short term. You give him the taste. You see if you want to extend him, maybe you don't, but at the very least, he's a player who you can put in right now into your top four, and you can feel comfortable rolling out there. So I think that's definitely an option. I'm not sure if Columbus is feeling the same way too, just after moving out Urasek too.
And lastly, on Columbus, I know Höglander is the trade chip that you're looking at to fix your defense needs, but for me, if Cole Sillinger is available, I said it yesterday, run, don't walk to Central Registry. Where are you on Sillinger?
Yeah, Cylinder, he's a fun player. He's one of these guys, and we talked about it last week too, is quit rushing players. Like Columbus, they rushed him out too. They put him in the bigs. I was clamoring for him to get sent back to go play at the World Juniors when he was a 19-year-old, even though he'd been in the NHL for a year and a half, just to kind of find that offensive juice, get that confidence back rolling against his age group. Didn't happen, obviously. So he's one of these players. He is kicking a little warm right now, though. You know, he's got like 5 or 6 points in his last 5 games. He's supposed to be a really strong two-way kind of hard-nosed player, and that defensive 200-foot game hasn't really developed all that well in that Columbus system, but still super young, you know, has the pedigree as a top 12 pick. I'm with you, is that if it's Hoglander for Cylinder, I make that trade. And then I look to move something else to get a defender elsewhere, just because it's an upside bet, right? I think he has a higher ceiling than Hoglander does. And he fits the middle of the ice, you know, situation that they could definitely use some help with too. So yeah, I'd be keen on making that deal too.
Where are you on the Canucks, who are not teaming with prospects just yet, but they are a contending team in sort of the larger contending category? Where are you on them trading first-round picks to get better before the end of the season? How valuable to the Vancouver Canucks is a 23rd overall pick right now when they want to make it to the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round?
Now you're asking a prospect guy, right? You're asking
I know, that's
scout
why
in
I'm
the room
asking.
here, and so this is
That's
why
why
it's
I'm
going to hold so much more weight. Is trade them, move them all, like just get them out of there. Is that you only have a window for so long, and if you believe your team can win as much as this team, you know, thinks that they can win and that they can push and be a legitimate contender, ship them out, right? What's
would you do it for a rental?
25th?
Like, would you do it for a high-profile rental? Yeah,
I would. Absolutely, I would. Now, would I attach Lakiramaki or Tom Wielander onto a first-round pick to get a rental? Probably not, because you have, like you said, they are very few and far between on the potential impact prospects, and eventually you do need guys pushing up, and that's how you actually maintain a contention window over like longer than a 2-year stretch, is that you need guys pushing up, and those are the 2 guys that are going to have to push up. So and that's what teams are going to want to, right? They're not going to want the 25th or 26th overall pick. They're going to want your top prospect. So that's where things are going to get dicey, and that's where organizations that have 4 or 5 top prospects and they have their late first and they have multiple seconds, they're the ones that are going to be able to outbid Vancouver in these situations. So it's going to be, probably won't be going big game hunting too much of a degree, but maybe that second tier, right? Maybe that second, third tier. And if you trust your scouts and they do some good pro scouting, you might be able to pull as much or better value than some of those top guys that move organizations. Because these trade deadline moves are the ones that happen, 3 weeks before. Is that just because you're the biggest name on the market doesn't mean you're going to, inflict the most value for your team down the stretch and into the playoffs too. So it's all about identifying the right talent that's going to fit with your organization. And yeah, if that involves moving a first or a second, 25th in a 25 or a 26 first round pick, I'm all for it.
Is Danila Klimovich resurrected his asset value to some degree, do you think? I mean, he's not slowing down, and the goals that he's scoring are very nice. Whether that's for them as a prospect to actually use or to dangle, is there something there for Klimovich right now?
I mean, he's feeling hot, and the kid's been streaky his whole life. Like that's why he ended up getting drafted where he was, because he got on a heater at the U18s when Benning was sitting there front row, and that's why they took him over Logan Stankoven, who was right down the road doing it all the time, forever. So yes, he can be a streaky scorer. He's always had a wicked release. He's always had a bit of a nasty streak to him, and when you put those two things together, then they look really good. And then, he can just go dark and be dormant for stretches too. So I hope that this is some sort of resurrection and he's taking some steps developmentally, and he can find that, and he can one day become kind of that bottom 6 mean guy that can maybe score a couple pretty goals that get you out of your seat. But if he had any value on the trade market, I'm sure the organization would be very quick to package him up into a trade, because they have no allegiance to him. They didn't draft him. I'm sure they, like everybody else, feel that was a poor pick in hindsight, and probably in foresight at the very moment it was made. But yeah, I hope the best for him. I hope he does turn into a player and it works for him either in this organization or another one.
I would like to see him at the NHL level, because he scores some beautiful goals, but we'll see. Help me out getting back to the first round here, Cam. I've heard 2025 is a weak draft, so you tell me whether you concur. Let's say the Canucks have picked like 25, which means they once again got to the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Maybe it's later, but let's just play ball with 25. What would that be equitable to, say, was it the 2023 draft that was really good and everybody liked? Like, Give me the comparison to what a late first rounder this year would be like compared to a strong draft.
Yeah, it's a second. It's a dart, right? It's pick 35, maybe it's pick 40. It is a weaker draft this year. Like the top 4-5 players, very, very interesting, very high end. And then we have our scouting meeting this weekend coming up, and it's like, who we putting at 6? Like there's half a dozen names there, and none of them I would feel all that great about taking at 6 overall. So it kind of gets to that point quickly, and then the depth does run light. So it is overall, I would say, a weaker draft class. 24 was stronger. 26 is projecting to be stronger. But again, it often will project these things out a year or two in advance, and they look really strong, and then you get to it, and it's like, it's pretty mid. And so, yeah, it's for Vancouver, like I said, is to move out a late first round pick. You could definitely frame it or couch it in your meetings as being like, this is kind of more like a early to mid second round pick value that we're trading away. The only problem is that every other GM knows that too.
So, just to be clear, the 5 are James Higgins, Porter Martone, Michael Misa, Matthew Schaefer, the defenseman, and is McQueen the center or Frondell the center? McQueen,
no, it's Roger McQueen.
Center?
Yeah, 6'5" center. Yeah.
Right.
Frondell is slipping a lot.
Is he? Okay.
Yeah.
It's World Junior season, Cam, and the first thing I'll say, I have tremendous regard for Al Murray, Hockey Canada's head scout. He was responsible for those 5 straight gold medals in the aughts. He helped build LA Kings Stanley Cup champions and Tampa Bay Lightning Stanley Cup champions. So I got a ton of time and respect for Al Murray. And anyone who's familiar with that tournament will tell you it's a 19-year-olds tournament, not an 18s or a 17-year-olds. Players do grow. They do get better in those intervening years, and you want to take the most 19-year-olds possible. That said, this is the first time in anybody's memory where a 3rd, 6th, 7th, and 9th overall pick from the previous draft were left off even the camp
the selection
roster.
camp. We're not talking the roster.
Camp roster.
Yeah.
Let alone 6 of the top 9 OHL scorers were left off this list, and 3 of the top 4 scoring OHL blue liners were left off this list. Not to mention the 2 top under 20 scorers in the queue were left off the Canadian World Junior Camp list. What do you make of the group that Canada is bringing to its World Junior Camp and the omissions from Canada's World Junior
Travis
Camp?
Green said he'd be surprised if there were 10 better defensemen than Carter Yukemchuk.
I mean, so here's the thing, right? Like every year with Canada, there's snubs that we can dissect because it's Canada. They have so many options. And sometimes they do get a little galaxy brain on it, trying to get, you got to get your shooter, your playmaker, and your banger on your line. You got to get that chemistry a la NHL 94. But at the same time, like I did some digging on this. So Beckett Seneca, 3rd overall pick, he is going to be, you have to go back 35 years, and that puts 2 3rd overall picks that weren't in the NHL that didn't play in the World Juniors that next year. JP Dumont's the only one in the last 35 years with Seneca, okay? TJ Ginla, he's battling an injury. Okay, so he wasn't going to be 100%, so that's why he's not there. But my goodness, Zane Parekh, can you honestly look in the mirror and be like, there is a better offensive defenseman than this kid? Yeah, I know he makes some mistakes. He takes some chippy penalties, and defensively he can be porous. But you pay that man to create and produce offense. So if he's not there, Matthew Schaefer, his potential of making that team just skyrocketed because I talked to a scout and he was just saying Schaefer's got to beat out Parekh. And he's got to beat out Yakimchuk. Well, neither of those guys are there, right? So there's a lot of omissions, and if Canada bows out in the quarters or something like that, everyone's going to be hollering. But at the same time, there's so much talent on that team still that they can still go in there as the favorite with the team that they're bringing too. So I'm like you, is that you got to respect the work that they're doing. They're trying to create a team. They're not trying to create an all-star team. It's a team that's trying to win a short tournament on a big stage. But at the same time, I'm probably extending a few more invites to a couple of those high-end players. Maybe not bring in a couple of those depth role players. You don't need, because you're going to cut a few of them too. Is that maybe you brought some more talent in and left a little more of the jam behind, and then you make your team from there. If there's injuries at camp, you've already got them there ready to go. So it is definitely going to be interesting to watch, and there is going to be some big name players that aren't going to be there. And I know some of the GMs and some of the teams are pretty disappointed that those guys didn't even get the invite. But they also, like you said, Matt, they recognize it is a 19-year-old tournament, and it's tough to crack when you're 17 or 18.
And if you're bringing a kid, so like I understand, then you go with big kids like a Porter Martone. Okay, that invitation I get. But McKenna over Misa, that one's a little surprising.
No, McKenna over Misa all day. McKenna's the best player in the CHL. He's wow. He's tremendous, and what he's done internationally for Canada already is like he's a lock, I think, for that team. He's so impressive. He's better than Misa, I think, for sure. But at the same time, like if it's me, I get bringing Porter Martone. He's a big kid. He's a highly talented kid. But Misa brings a little more. He brings more speed. He can play the middle of the ice. I think he leads the OHL in faceoffs wins. So you slide him as your 13th forward, and all of a sudden your second line center goes down. Boom, he can slide into that role. Porter Martone can't. Right? Like he's going to have to play down the lineup. He could be your net front guy or maybe the bumper guy in the power play on the second unit. So it's just different roles. And he's not that physical either. Like he's not going to go bang. Martone, that's not his role. Maybe he will with Canada with the jersey on. But he's a leader. He's a great player. So it makes a lot of sense. But it is kind of neat to see that we have Martone and Schaefer and McKenna, 3 underage guys coming to camp. And I expect all 3 to make the team too.
Wow.
And from a Canucks perspective, Sawyer Minio for Canada, the third-round defenseman playing with the Seattle Thunderbirds. Tom Wielander with Sweden, of course, in a sophomore season at Boston University. Do either of the Swedish wingers, Ulriksson or Fernström, do you give them any chance to make the Swedish team at this World Juniors?
I was thinking about it before coming on here, and I think Ulriksson he's a dark horse. He's a dark horse. I was actually trying to poke around to see if I could get the camp invite list early, and I didn't get to pull it before I got on here. But I have a feeling he maybe might get the invite. He's never played internationally with them before, which is always hard to break into as a 19-year-old because they know those players so well, the ones that they've worked with at the U17, at the U18, at the Helenka, right? They have that history with them. But Ulriksson, a point-of-game player, so big, so rangy, can play the middle of the ice, can play the wing, can get the net front for you, can be physical. Something that Swedish team's probably going to need some banging, right? So I think he's an interesting one that if he gets an invite, maybe he can make some noise at camp.
And Fernström's had a good season.
He has had a good season, and he's a pure offensive guy. I don't love the foot speed, and I'm going to get chirped by some Canucks scouts as soon as I say that. But he's high IQ offensively, and he's a pure offensive player. So if Frundell is injured still, if Victor Eklund, another high 25 kid, if he's, I think he's got a concussion right now. We'll hope that he comes back. He took like a referee's knee in the face or something recently. If those guys aren't available, does that open up an opportunity for them to bring in a more offensive player like Fernström to give him a look? So I think both are dark horses, but I give the edge to the 19-year-old in Ulriksson that he might be able to squeeze in there.
Having a very nice year with Guelph in the OHL, 19 points, 9 goals in 20 games, and you can't teach 6'6", 235 to 40.
And on North American ice and all that.
That's it. In Canadian cauldrons, if you're Sweden, you have been intimidated over the years.
Yes.
So that is something you have to
You've looked flimsy, so
Yes,
don't be flimsy.
Marvelous stuff. Love your expertise on the prospects and beyond, Cam Robinson. We'll catch up next Tuesday.
All right. Thanks, fellas.
If you are struggling with things like managing stress, anxiety, relationships, or divorce, reach out to the counselors at Advanced Counseling. Book your free initial consultation today at advancedcounseling.ca.
Sekeres and Price from the historic Wall Center, where you can turn game night into a game weekend. Book your stay at the Wall. Enjoy the exclusive Sekeres and Price rate. Call 604-331-1000. Mention us. Some blackout dates apply based on availability. You can text this show, 778-402-9680. Email live at sekeresandprice.com. All of it to the Great Clips inbox. Great Clips.
It's going to be great.
So just building off what Cam Robinson was telling us there, and we didn't do a good enough job on this yesterday. So there are 4 British Columbia kids at the Canadian World Junior Camp. Defenseman Sawyer Minio, of course, of Kamloops, Vancouver Canucks draftee with the Seattle Thunderbirds, 89th pick in 2023. Tanner Molendijk playing with the Saskatoon Blades from McBride, BC. First rounder from Nashville, 24th overall in 2023. Matthew Wood, another Nashville first rounder, 15th overall, who's at the University of Minnesota. He's from Nanaimo. And then Andrew Crystal, who's having a fantastic season for the Kelowna Rockets, a Burnaby kid, Washington pick, 40th overall in 2023. The ones we talked about missing, Bennett Seneca, the 3rd overall to Anaheim, Teach Ginla, of course, Jerome's kid from Kelowna on Utah. Carter Yachemka Yakemchuk, who nearly made the Ottawa Senators out of camp, like
Yeah.
7th overall pick, and Zane Parak, the 9th overall pick from Calgary. If you're wondering, where's Caden Lindstrom, the number 4 overall pick from Chetwynd, BC? Columbus Draft, he has not played yet this year. So there's those guys who are missing that are like, curious. But then Pete Hughes, a former scout, WHL, USHL, mentions that 6 of the top 9 U20 OHL scorers are off this camp list. Michael Misa, which we mentioned, Liam Greentree, the big power forward the LA Kings took in the first round this past year. And then defenseman-wise, Luca Morelli, who he's the number 2 scoring defenseman in the OHL, is not on this list, nor is Parak, nor is Henry Muse, who was the 3rd-round pick of Calgary this past year, and then the 2 top scorers in the queue, not to mention Michael Hage and James Haggins, both in the NCAA, both first-round picks last year. They are tied for first in scoring amongst under-19 NCAA players. So Hockey Canada, Al Murray, and the group have gone a different route after finishing outside the medal table last year. Blake, you wonder whether that's it. Canada had won the previous 2 gold medals before finishing off the podium. Didn't even play for a medal last year in Gothenburg.
It needs to be underscored again, folks. This is the selection camp roster. We're gonna have the same debates now over the actual team.
Mm-hmm.
But do you not, as Hockey Canada, owe it to yourself to see a couple more of these guys? Just have them in camp,
right?
Even if you're very skeptical, we're gonna name him, but I don't think he's gonna be it. Well, then just see.
Well, and you wonder, like, typically when Canada's fallen short here, it's because we've gotten a little too creative and taken too many young players. Last year was the first time in 5 years that Canada did not play for the gold medal. So you wonder if that sent a shockwave through the program, that they made them feel that they have to change things up. What Cam said, though, about building the perfect line, I hear you. I have learned the Rob Zamner lesson from Torino. For me, you just throw offense after offense after offense at them, and waves of offense, and see if they can maintain. To me, that is always the best recipe for Canada at this tournament. 4 lines of guys who can score. Let's see who's got the depth of class to be able to defensively hold up, either in goal, amongst the pairings, and the forwards as well. Because oftentimes you're playing teams with a bunch of forwards who, those kids are good scorers, right? Back in Finland, back in Czechia, wherever the case may be. And suddenly now they're playing a lot in their own zone because the Canadian forwards are so good. We'll see how it goes. Tournament's in Ottawa, so home ice there for the Canadian side. Coming off that non-medal, the U.S. is the defending gold medalist. They've won 2 of the last 4. Farhan reports, Walshy, that Jordan McSimic, the Lions offensive coordinator, is headed home to Edmonton, where he grew up, to serve as the offensive coordinator on Mark Killam's new staff. Now, it was interview day yesterday for the BC Lions head coaching candidates. That would suggest that McSimic is not going to get the job, and we're down to Buck Pierce or Mike Benavides.
Wow. I mean, I think everybody had Buck Pierce in. If it's ink, it's erasable ink, I suppose. But, I think he was a front runner anyway. Be interesting to Mike Benavides sort of comes in
Mike
from a farther back position.
Mike deserves it, as we talked about with Farhan last week. Mike deserves another shot. He had a winning record here. He was a good young up-and-coming coach. He deserves another shot.
And, man, does he want it?
Oh, does
Benny
he ever?
wants
Does he
it.
ever?
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's no questioning the desire there. I would love to see him get an opportunity. So the Toronto Blue Jays are whining and dining Juan Soto. The insiders believe that they are going to offer the most money for the free agent outfielder, ex the New York Yankees, north of $600 million in total money. Of course, the Red Sox and the Mets are going to offer that as well, and the Yankees may as well. Now, word yesterday, the Blue Jays are in on Roki Sasaki, this fireballing Japanese pitcher that is the object of your intrigue, Blake, which I find somewhat interesting because the offense and the bullpen need so much help that are you really going to spend all that money on Sasaki? Interesting piece of history here that might become useful because, look, Soto apparently is close with Vladdy Jr., but are you really going to win a free agent derby against the Yankees, Red Sox, and Mets? I have my suspicions, especially because I think the Mets will go above and beyond money-wise. That has been the owner, Steve Cohen's MO. Plus, the Yankees have an allure that, let's face it, the Blue Jays just don't. In 2020, the Blue Jays were hot in pursuit of free agent pitcher Garrett Cole, who may have been the best free agent on the market that year. They didn't get him, but they went with a fallback option in Hyunjin Ryu. And all of it was under the common agency of Scott Boras, the super agent in Major League Baseball. So people are now speculating, if you finish second on Soto, are you going to wind up with the next best Scott Boras client?
Who is?
Either former Blue Jay Teoscar Hernandez or Baltimore outfielder Anthony Santander, who hit a home run last year at Rogers Center that I still can't believe it hit the back pillar of the second deck. That's how hard he hit the ball. So people are wondering, is Teo coming back or Santander if they finish second on Soto? And if they are, in fact, in on Sasaki, who is not represented by Boras, we should say, Corbin Burns or Max Fried, who are two of the best free agent starting pitchers available. Look, any of those names improve the Blue Jays a whole lot. The question is, are you going to improve in enough areas, given the status of your bullpen, where you're basically starting from scratch, and given the status of some of the holes you have in the lineup on the offensive side?
Santander, 2 years younger than Teoscar.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and is he? Do you have it in front of you? Is he a switch hitter? I think Santander might be a switch hitter.
Bats both. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He is a attractive offensive player. Of that, there is no doubt. You can throw him in left field next year, and you're going to be Santander, Varsho, and Springer. Okay, I mean, if you get second half Varsho where he picked things up a little bit, second half Springer, then maybe you're okay. I mean, I still think you have some holes around the diamond, but nevertheless. As for the Mariners, Ken Rosenthal reporting.
I've seen some reporting that Santander will sign with the Blue Jays.
Really?
Yeah. So
that it's a done deal as we speak and record this?
The headline on this is Anthony Santander will sign with the Blue Jays.
Oh, really?
We'll see.
Takes you out of Soto, but yeah, be an upgrade. And then you hope Soto goes to the Mets and he's not in your division. Rosenthal on the Mariners. They are looking to upgrade the third base position. So who is that? Is that Alex Bregman, ex of the Houston Astros, who's a free agent? Willie Adames is a shortstop, although not a particularly great one defensively. There's some talk that some of the free agent suitors there would move Adames to third base, ex of Milwaukee. And then Alec Boehm, who is available via trade with the Philadelphia Phillies. Rosenthal also reports the Mariners are just going to go in-house at second base. The last 2 years, Seattle has tried to go out and fix second base and make it a bigger, better position offensively by going with Colton Wong and Jorge Polanco. Both of them were absolute failures. And so now Jerry Dipoto and company are looking at Dylan Moore, Ryan Bliss, who's got fantastic speed if he can get on base, and a one-time first-round pick, Cole Young, that they think will matriculate up the minors and be ready in the second half of the year. So they think like they have three in-house options there at second base. That third base will be the focus of improvement. Of course, there's a limited budget there in Seattle, and you do wonder whether they're going to dip into that terrific farm system. It is still one of the best farm systems in baseball. And, of course, that generational rotation. You cannot spoil another year of that generational rotation if you're Seattle. And if you do have to trade Brian Wu, who's probably your fifth starter there, to help the offense, I think you can probably even get by with that. Meetings next week, I think things are going to heat up here for the Blue Jays and the M's quickly. Surrey Mitsubishi poll question results from Monday. Would you trade Niels Höglander for defenseman Marcus Peterson or Paterson? Blake and I had a debate on how you would vote on this, and I'm afraid to say that Blake's side won. He thought you would vote yes on this. I thought you would vote no. Yes got the victory, 52.5% to 47.5% on 1,500 votes. Terrific comments. Aaliyah, longtime audience member for us. If Paterson had a couple years left at a reasonable cap hit, I would, but trading a feisty 24-goal scorer for pending UFA Paterson is a hard pass for me. Braden, what do the Canucks have to add? 1 for 1? Definitely. Asan, not straight up. People need to watch Paterson play. He's not a puck mover. He's basically a slight upgrade on Soucy. We need more than that. There was a lot of Paterson is too akin to Soucy that for us to make that deal. Fair. And then MJW says, I only voted yes because it would be hilarious to have another Paterson.
It would be.
Saw a lot of that as well.
Because I think Elias Pettersson is going to play this year. I think DPD gets a couple of games this year, and to have 3 of them in the lineup would be chef's kiss.
Full disclosure, I have made a note on E's and O's, and I have no idea what it pertains to. It either says right as pain or right as rain or right us rain or anyways. If you remember that from Monday's show, please do advise.
Just go comb through the show again from yesterday.
I'm unwilling to do that. So I'm reporting that there was something that went wrong, even if I can't specify, just in the name of full transparency, disclosure, and good practice.
I'll self-report, Matt. That was on me, that one.
Well done, Blake. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Appreciate you spending some time and connecting with us. Please do subscribe to all our assorted channels, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Follow on social. That's X, Insta, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Blue Sky. Live on many of those platforms, noon Pacific time, each and every weekday. And, of course, support the community sponsors you hear us talking about. Keep it local.